Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for including me in this symposium. So my paper is largely about Muslim movements in India and how there is a turn within these Muslim movements, which can be described as a Maqasid turn after 1990s. So to give a brief idea about the context, I will very briefly explain the context of my research or the case study which I'm looking at into. So there were a lot of Muslim organizations in South India, especially in the state of Kerala, before 1990. And they were named as Kerala Muslim Aikya Sangam, Kerala Jamiyatul Ulama, Tablighi Jamaat, Samasta Kerala Jamiyatul Ulama, Jamaat-e-Islam-e Hind, Kerala Nadwatul Mujahideen, etc. When we look at these movements, we can clearly see that they have a general characteristics of retaining their religious naming pattern itself. And their larger audience were the Muslim community. And they were described as religious sects rather than Muslim movements. However, the changes which were happening in the national and the regional level, as well as the international level, has drastically affected these Muslim movements. Especially in India after 1970s, a lot of controversies and issues were happening, and towards the end, it culminated with the demolition of Babri Masjid in 1992. At the similar time, in the international level, the Islamic revolution in Iran, Soviet defeat in Afghan, the Gulf War, all these were having repercussions in India as well. Then what happened? Then there are new kind of movements coming up in the Muslim community, and they were named as this: People's Democratic Party, Popular Front of India, Solidarity Youth Movement, and there were different other parties as well. So there is a visible shift in the pattern of naming itself. The movements change from the standard Islamic names towards a more kind of secular or constitutional kind of naming. However, the slogans of these movements are also quite interesting. For example, People's Democratic Party have this slogan called "Power to Awareness, Liberation for the Oppressed," while the Popular Front of India have the slogan "Freedom from Hunger and Freedom from Fear." Solidarity Youth Movement talks about the revolution itself. So, general characteristics of these movements is that they talks more about constitutional rights, and they imagine Islam in a new way. So that they started debating about the issues of caste, gender, community, even environment and nation. And that's how they changed their priorities towards environmental activism, gender justice, human rights, and all. For example, these are some of the pictures of these movements in which they are doing different kinds of struggle. The one in which you can see is about the movements banning Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all. This is Popular Front of India, and they are demanding reservation to Muslims in employment and education. And this is PDP, and the slogan that is written in Malayalam language is Avarna Aikyam, which means the solidarity of lower caste or Avarna communities. So what's happening here? What I propose is that there is a Maqasid turn in these movements, which we can see when we analyze these movements more closely. For example, Popular Front of India gives their in their constitution, they say that they are an organization which is moving towards coordination and management of such efforts for the achievement of socio-economic, cultural, and political empowerment of the deprived and the downtrodden, and the nation at large. It will try to establish egalitarian society in which freedom, justice, and security are enjoyed by all. I want you to focus on these terms of freedom, justice, and security. Similarly, Abdul Nasser Mahadani, who was the chairman of People's Democratic Party, he says that I am a committed Muslim, and every Muslim has an obligation to support the poor, Adivasis, and Dalits. It's my duty to stand by you to fight for your rights, if indeed to be a martyr dying for this cause. In the same way, Solidarity Youth Movement uses this caption, Janasevanam Deivaradhanayana, which means serving humanity is worshipping God. And they describe themselves as a group of youth committed to justice and welfare. So here we can see how they are having a kind of Maqasid turning politics. When it comes to the environmental issues, Samat Kunnaka, who is the secretary of the Solidarity Youth Movement, he writes, solidarity has become the perfect representation of the Quran, which touches man's naval connection to the soil through the concept of man being born from the soil and returning to the soil. Solidarity has timely introduced the Quranic theme of human habitation in harmony with the nature. The Quran, which depicts a strong nation and a clean society, inhabiting it emphasizes the need for a clean environment. The Quranic metaphors of pure air, rihun tayyib, pure soil, pure water, Mount Thahir, all these are kind of a dream of an unpolluted air, soil, and water. The religion of the prophets teaches that the word, you, in Allah's word, all that is on earth was created for you, includes all human beings until the end of the world. So they're talking about how to save the environment for generations. And Solidarity sought to incorporate the philosophy of nature in the Quran and the words of Prophet into the environmental struggles in Kerala. Similarly, the other movement, which is Student Islamic Organization, which is an offshoot of Jamaat-e-Islami, they had a conference in which one particular section was devoted to fiqh and usulul fiqh, and they had debates on Maqasid Sharia as well. However, what I'm focusing is on the campaign which was run by this Student Islamic Organization. They had a campaign with the slogan "Go Green," and they made these three things as their aims: to abide by the teachings of Islam, which view a sound nexus between living beings and the natural order, thus providing a strong foundation for peaceful and healthier coexistence. To create massive awakening among human beings and reminding their human responsibility to take care of the environment and protect natural resources. And more interestingly, the Student Islamic Organization of India described their Islamic environmental practice based on four principles. Principles of Tawheed, Khilafah, Akhirah, and Mizan. To study these movements and the shift which is happening in these movements, there are some existing approaches that there are some existing studies which define some certain approaches. Majorly, most of the scholars talked about a kind of return of religion. All the post-secular scholars largely talks about a return of religion, as if religion has went or vanished somewhere in the 1970s or 80s. Even Dr. Wail Hallak says that there is an impulse of modernity which has created a deep sense of moral laws, which has led to the formation of Islamist movements itself. And this regarding the shift within the Islamist movements, Niloufar Gold says there are two phases within these movements. So in the first phase, there is a quest for Islamic identity, there is a radicalization, Islamic militancy. While in the second phase, there is a decline of ideological fervor, giving way to multiplicity of authorities and multiplicity of voices within these movements. And then different scholars try to talk about this second phase through different names. Asaf Bayat famously talks about post-Islamism to characterize this second phase, while Robert Hefner coins the term civil Islam to talks about the Muslim engagements with the modern kind of nation state. While Gilles Kepels talks about Islamist democracy to talk about the Islamist movement's engagement with the modern nation state and democracy. Salvatore and Eckermann talks about public Islam to talk about this same thing. When it comes to the Muslim movements in India, actually, there are not enough studies which are good enough to characterize these movements. So the existing approaches to the study of Muslim community in India takes some of the already existing rubrics. They either talk about the minority position or the syncretic elements within the Muslim community, and talking about how the Indian Muslim community is different from the Arabian Islam, and how there is a continuous process of Islamization that is happening within Muslim community. And the other group of scholars talks about the Muslim identity in India as a reminiscence of the colonial practice and all. And when it comes to the studies on Muslim community in South India, it's again very limited, and that is often drawn as in a comparative framework with the North Indian Muslim community. So, what are the limitations of the existing studies on these Muslim movements? As you can see, most of the studies which I mentioned in the initial phase, whether it is Gilles Kepels, Asaf Bayat, or Niloufar Gold, all those studies have an emphatic ethnographic curiosity on Muslim majority countries, whether it is Turkey, Egypt, or whichever. There is a lack of studies where the Muslims community are in minority. And the limited studies on Muslim movements in India fail to understand the internal dynamics and jurisprudential developments that constitute the Muslim identity and religious discourse. They fail to understand the translation of Islamic law into the local dynamics. And they fail to understand the political assertion of the Muslims in the post-1990s. And that is why they duped these post-1990 Muslim movements either as extremist movements, or they called it as a survival tactic due to the Hindutva majoritarianism. These existing studies, especially on the Muslim movements in India, they consider Muslim community as a passive community who are always submissive to the coercive power of the state. So if we can focus more on the hermeneutical and jurisprudential developments within Islam, I think we can have a different way of understanding Muslim movements and the Muslims as thinking agents capable of making meanings. Also, rather than treating fiqh as a given, fixed and universal set of prescriptions that can be then imposed on specific phenomena, a researcher has to analyze what does it do to our understanding of Muslim societies and discourses. So, can the understanding of Maqasid can be used to understand the Muslim movements itself? That is my very thrust of the aim of my paper itself. Further, the meanings produced through fiqh are not only internal to Muslims, they always refer to something outside. The Muslim community's engagement with the larger majoritarian community, the secular nation state, and the constitution, etc. Just like that, while there is a development within jurisprudence about the classification of Islamic state or land from into Darul Harb, Darul Islam, or Darul Ahad to different kind of two different ways, these kinds of approaches are also can be seen in the engagement of Muslim movements also. So there are some studies which talks about the connection between Muslim movements and Maqasid approach. For example, Halim Rene, the Australian scholar, talks about the how Maqasid approach will help Muslim movements to overcome the existing problems with which they are engaging, and how it can give an Islamic legitimacy while evolving from an ideology-oriented to policy-oriented parties, and thereby responding to the needs and aspiration of broad constituencies. However, Halim Rana considers Maqasid approach as something outside the organization, which can be used by the organization. But what I am trying to see is that, can there be the Maqasid within the organization, or the organization as owning the Islamic law itself? When it comes to India, the fiqh of minorities is more important. I'm not going to the details of the history of fiqh al-aqalliyat, how it has been evolved and all, which we already might know. However, most of the modern scholars who engaged with fiqh al-aqalliyah, they wanted to make a peaceful coexistence, especially of Muslims in the West. So the center focus of fiqh al-aqalliyah by the modern Muslim scholars is Muslims in the West. So the fiqh al-aqalliyah is designed to allow Muslim minorities to honorably subsist and integrate into their new countries while preserving their Islamic identity. Khalid Abu Fadl also talks how the juristic discourse on Muslim minority evolved in their attempt to reconcile the contemporary demands. So, as I said, the primary problem with the fiqh al-aqalliyat, the existing fiqh al-aqalliyat, is that they are aimed at reconciling the conflict between Islam and West. If we go through the debates which happened in fiqh al-aqalliyah, even the writings of Qaradawi, or the whole background to the Qaradawi's fiqh al-aqalliyah, there were conferences which happened in France and all. It's all mainly focused on how to reconcile the conflict between Islam and West. However, the Muslim community in India is a bit different and is a conundrum actually. They are minorities, but the Muslim communities in India is not numerically irrelevant. They constitute like 200 million population, which is way higher than many other so-called Muslim countries. The other interesting aspect about Muslims in India is that they have a history of ruling the Indian subcontinent for more than 600 years. So then what will be the jurisprudential status of India in the classical division, whether it's a Darul Islam or Darul Harb or the lost land? Due to the same history, there is a reminiscence of culture and heritage of Islam in the Indian geography. In these ways, Muslim community in India is different. And above all, due to the specific case of partition between India and Pakistan, Muslims who are remaining in India are those people who chose to remain in a non-Muslim majority. So these aspects make India a different conundrum. So to understand the Maqasid turn and how the Muslim movements are using fiqh al-aqalliyah, my focus will be on these three scholars. I will be focusing on Yusuf al-Qaradawi, Maulana Maududi, Imam Shatibi. So using the writings of these three scholars, I will try to see how the Maqasid turn is happening within these movements. So, what are the significance of understanding Maqasid for these Muslim movements? The meaning of Islam lies also with the organization. Hence, they can be called as interpretative movements. Or in other way, in the Indian case after 90s, Muslim movements becomes the legitimate authority to talk about the law or the objectives of Sharia. In other words, the ijtihad shifts from individual act towards a collective act. Secondly, understanding the dynamics of Islamic jurisprudence will probably help to consciously move away from the existing categorizations. The Muslim movements are already categorized as Salafi, Sufi, Sunni, Islamist in different ways. So trying to understand the Muslim movements through the Maqasid might enhance a better theorization of the political articulation of Muslim movements. And at the end, definitely understanding the Maqasid turn in the Muslim movements will help to counter the attempts to reduce the new Muslim activism as mere survival mechanism or masquerading. Usually, the mainstream understanding of the shift among Muslim movements is that they are trying to masquerade themselves from the Hindutva majoritarianism. But trying to understand the internal debates of on jurisprudence within these movements, I think we can have a different kinds of approach. And towards the end, this is what I try to think after writing the draft. What does the Maqasid turn do to the Muslim sovereignty? Actually, with the with the transformation of Muslim movements, there is an unmaking of community and making of citizens, obedient citizens, a constitutionalized, a secularized citizen, or in other words, minority becomes a self-disciplined category, erasing the questions of Muslim sovereignty. It is also a mechanism through which modern state seeks to characterize itself as a singular personality, thereby erasing the questions of Muslim sovereignty. The transition from Muslims to Muslim minorities is a The transition from Muslims to Muslim minorities is also a question of losing of Muslim sovereignty and Muslim autonomy. I will describe this with a simple example which happened to come across my research. So in 18th century, a group of upper caste Nair warriors decided to demolish a masjid in Malabar, which is a place in South India, to get rid of the curse as per the suggestion of an astrologist. In that time, a group of Muslims, mostly women, went to the local ruler requesting him to not demolish the masjid. These women and the people, they offered him all their wealth. They said, we'll give you all our wealth, jewelry, labor, but do not demolish Allah's masjid. This was their demand. When it comes to the Babri Masjid demolition, which happened in 1992, the language of Muslim movements shifts strategically. Instead of saying Allah's masjid, all the Muslim movements said the demolition of Babri Masjid is the demolition of the domes of secularism. So what's happening when the Allah's masjid is changing to demolition of domes of secularism? Isn't it the loss of Muslim sovereignty that is happening through this Maqasid turn within the Muslim movements? So this is largely the idea of the paper. And yeah, thank you. Jazakallah.